In a relationship, people don't fear rejection, they fear the silence it brings. Have you ever woken up in the middle of the night, heart pounding, staring at your phone, desperately hoping for a loving message from your partner, yet all you receive is a cold, echoing silence that carves loneliness into your soul? If so, you may be trapped in the anxious-avoidant cycle. One side craving connection, the other recoiling to protect itself. Imagine this. You spend hours texting, planning dates, and brainstorming ways to win their affection. Elation floods you when they say yes, but only for a moment. Then they pull away, becoming silent, elusive. I'm busy today. You know I care. Let's reschedule. That clash between passionate pursuit and icy retreat fuels an unending loop of emotional turmoil. In our fast-paced society, the old belief that love demands total surrender is increasingly obsolete. Many hide behind a mask of independence, terrified of pain even more than loneliness. Yet the cost of not getting close enough to understand one another leaves our hearts screaming, I want to be loved, must it cost this much distance? According to psychologist John Bowlby, the way we bond with our caregivers in childhood shapes how we seek and maintain closeness in adulthood. If you recognize in yourself or your partner the pattern of intense yearning followed by sudden withdrawal, now is the time to pause, reflect, and heal. You don't have to endure this too little, too much sensation forever. Let's uncover the 5 critical signs and chart a path out of the anxious-avoidant relationship cycle, so your heart no longer pounds in the dark of loneliness. Sign 1, feeling suffocated. Imagine standing at your partner's doorstep on a crisp autumn afternoon, your heart pounding like a battle drum, your hand trembling as you press the doorbell again and again, desperate for a smile or a hug that could banish days of loneliness. This is the heart of the anxious individual, perpetually craving intimacy and closeness, like a magnet permanently drawn toward the other. Attachment theory labels this drive as hyperactivation. The moment they sense emotional distance, the anxious partner ramps up communication, texting incessantly, checking read receipts obsessively, analyzing every tiny detail of the conversation in an effort to hold their partner firmly in view. Yet, for the avoidant counterpart, this relentless pursuit and endless string of unread messages become an overwhelming force. Like a sudden tidal wave they must fend off. Avoidant individuals not only prize personal space, they regard it as sacred territory, but also employ a deactivation strategy to shield themselves emotionally. The instant they feel suffocated by their partner's closeness, they retreat like a snail into its shell, withdrawing all their senses, even limiting phone responses and choosing public meeting spots for safety. They rely on this self-regulation mechanism to prevent feeling overwhelmed, because empathizing too deeply with another's emotions can trigger fears of losing autonomy, a fear rooted in childhood wounds. That sense of suffocation isn't only evident in slow replies or ghosting after moments of intense connection. It weighs on the anxious partner like a silent pressure. Every time a text goes unanswered for hours, they ask themselves, what did I do wrong? Am I not important enough? That anxiety quickly spirals into endless speculations. Maybe they're upset with me. Perhaps we've broken up and they just can't say it, trapping the anxious partner in a perpetual state of vigilance, constantly questioning their own shortcomings. Their heart becomes an alarm clock that never switches off, incessantly ringing unanswered questions. Meanwhile, the avoidant perceives their partner's insistent advances from an entirely different angle. It's not that they don't care, but that too much closeness disorients them. They fear that surrendering to uncontrolled intimacy could ensnare them in a relationship with no room to breathe, space they have learned to guard aggressively since childhood. As Edward Tronick noted in his research on avoidant attachment, avoidant individuals often use emotional distance as a preventive mechanism to minimize the risk of emotional hurt. Tronick, 2018. Thus begins a psychological chess match. The anxious partner chases silence with texts, calls, and promises to change. The avoidant retreats behind invisible walls, gradually narrowing contact until only the reassurance of, I'm fine, remains a loneliness cloaked in calm. This back and forth of pressure and withdrawal spins like an unbraked wheel, draining both participants. The anxious are driven to the brink of emotional exhaustion, while the avoidant finds security in maintaining a certain distance. So how can this cycle be broken? First, both must recognize their own coping mechanisms. The anxious must learn to honor personal space and pause before firing off a message. The avoidant must dare to open a small window and share feelings with their partner by setting flexible rather than rigid boundaries. Only when both understand that the need for closeness and the need for independence are not inherently contradictory, but can coexist within a secure relationship, can they move from reactive push and pull to honest mutual communication. A relationship should not be a battlefield where each person defends themselves. It should be common ground, where both cultivate clear, sturdy boundaries that do not sever connection. When the anxious learn to take a breath, and the avoidant gently expands their circle, the suffocating feeling dissolves, making space for genuine dialogue free from fear and pressure. We will explore the remaining signs in due course. But first, take a deep breath and remember, the feeling of suffocation is simply an alarm, reminding you to recalibrate the relationship's rhythm so that love never becomes a puzzle and you are no longer lost between two worlds. Sign 2, feeling abandoned. As the echoes of suffocation fade and the chaotic melody of unread messages gives way to a gloomy silence, the second sign, the feeling of abandonment, begins pounding at the anxious partner's heart. In the moments when their frantic typing and urgent texts suddenly drop into a hollow void, all that remains is the echo of sent messages left unread and the pounding question, why is he silent? Repeating relentlessly, refusing to let go. The deliberate withdrawal of the avoidant partner, whether it's a late, perfunctory reply, an indefinitely postponed date, or a call cut short, stirs the deepest fear in the anxious, the fear of being left behind. They conjure thousands of scenarios. Their partner's feelings are changing. Their partner's care is dwindling. Their partner has found peace in a world where they no longer exist. Each time the phone lights up without showing their beloved's name, their heart contracts as if a piece of their soul has been torn away, leaving behind an impossible-to-fill abyss. Even moments that once felt intimate quickly become battlegrounds of hurt. When the avoidant softly says, I need time to think, the anxious hears a death sentence on the relationship. They leap from hope to despair in an instant, from believing everything will be okay to sensing their world collapsing. The feeling of abandonment isn't mere loneliness. It's a prolonged famine of emotional sustenance, compelling them to cling, to beg for any sign of affection. Paradoxically, the more they beg, the wider the gap grows, because every desperate plea lays another brick in the invisible wall separating them. In attachment theory, John Bowlby described the loss model. When the fear of abandonment takes center stage, the anxious individual feels as though they are losing a piece of themselves, a core fragment of their worth. It isn't the failure of love itself that wounds them most, but the uncertainty of their partner's emotions, a slow-acting poison seeping into their heart. This very uncertainty drives an invisible dagger deep into self-esteem, eroding belief in deserving protection, consistency, and unwavering love. Compliments and caring gestures are instantly shadowed by doubt. Is he just stalling before disappearing? As the sense of abandonment spreads, the anxious partner's body reacts violently. Insomnia, loss of appetite, poor concentration, and emotional highs and lows intensify. They text knowing there may be no reply, call despite low odds of connection, or script entire conversations, posing and answering questions, sinking into a spiral of negativity. Yet no matter their efforts, they cannot dispel the chilling boundary. Unwittingly, they become the emotional gatekeeper for a shaken relationship, and the more they fortify their defense, the more fragile they feel. Meanwhile, the avoidant partner experiences withdrawal from an entirely different perspective. This action isn't necessarily a wish to end the relationship, but an attempt to protect themselves from feeling engulfed. They fear that too much attention will cost them their identity and personal freedom values they hold above safety. Their silence, although meant for self-preservation, inadvertently fans the flames of the anxious partner's despair. Caught between these extremes, the relationship becomes an exhausting war. One side fears absence, the other fears presence. The void the avoidant creates is not only spatially wide, but emotionally deep, making the anxious feel as though they are plunging into an invisible abyss with no bottom. They try everything to draw their partner back. Movie nights, gifts, anecdotes, even self-abasement just to buy a little time. A fleeting conversation, but the harder they try, the more exhausted and desperate they become. Because the avoidant, however caring, cannot dismantle defenses built long ago. So how can one break free from the engulfing feeling of abandonment? First, the anxious must recognize that silence does not always equate to total rejection. Sometimes it's simply their partner's way of recharging emotionally. They could propose clear, constructive requests. If you're going to be silent for more than 24 hours, I'll worry. Is it possible to agree on a quick check-in so I know you're okay? Conversely, the avoidant must understand that the doors they close also disorient their partner. Planning contacts, such as scheduling a set time to talk, allows them to protect their private space without pushing their loved one into fear of abandonment. On the path to healing, both must establish an emotional covenant agreements on how to behave when confronted with withdrawal or the fear of being left behind. For example, when the avoidant needs space, they text, "I won't reply immediately, but I promise to return within 12 hours. And the anxious pledges to remain calm during that interval. Such transparency and respect not only reinforce trust, but gradually dismantle the invisible wall, transforming the dread of abandonment into confidence that, even in silence, there is accord and faith waiting on the other side. When this mechanism runs smoothly, the anxious no longer has to exhaust themselves to secure the relationship's existence, and the avoidant no longer needs to hide to preserve their emotional autonomy. Ultimately, the fear of abandonment is simply an alarm signaling disharmony in the rhythm of two souls. When anxious and avoidant partners dismantle emotional fortifications together and build a foundation of mutual understanding, the distance is gradually filled with trust and respect so that the relationship ceases to be a race between fear and need and becomes a peaceful journey side by side, where even moments of silence never leave either alone. SIGS 3. After confronting the fear of abandonment, when both anxious and avoidant have acknowledged the wave of withdrawal and claimed their own space, a new sign emerges: the fear of a one-sided relationship. This feeling transcends suffocation or loss of direction. It's the painful realization that you may be the only one investing in the love you share. The anxious partner, accustomed to attacking the relationship with loving texts, praise, and endless date plans, suddenly recognizes that they alone shoulder the effort. Every call made and every shared activity is their initiative. During conflicts, they're the first to pick up the phone, the first to send a message, desperately striving to diffuse tension. Meanwhile, the avoidant partner shows little enthusiasm for building bridges, or responds curtly, merely a gesture of politeness. This imbalance becomes even more glaring in the heat of an argument. The anxious long for immediate resolution. They extend conciliatory words and actions, even sacrificing personal needs just to see a smile. Conversely, the avoidant, unwilling to face the issue, avoids the tense dialogue. They offer brief replies, steer the conversation elsewhere, or vanish for hours, even days, to cool off. This avoidance only deepens the anxious partner's conviction that they're fighting solo while their partner remains indifferent. The fear of a one-sided relationship isn't mere subjectivity, it's built on a series of lived experiences. Every time the anxious asks, "Are we okay?" every time they're the first to apologize, reinforces the belief that they bear all the responsibility. The psychology of give and take cements trust and stability in a relationship, but when that balance tips, the sensation of giving without receiving instantly becomes a profound emotional wound. With each attempt to mend the rift, met with inadequate response, the anxious grow more wounded. They begin to wonder, are all my gestures, plans, and efforts just one-sided monologues? The exhaustion isn't just physical fatigue from sustaining the dialogue. It's mental exhaustion from feeling their worth being ignored. A sense of injustice surfaces. They object to giving without reciprocity, even though they understand the avoidant's reasons for maintaining distance. On the flip side, the avoidant often fails to fully appreciate how their indifference or half-hearted replies affect their partner. To them, independence and emotional self-regulation matter more than the anxious's need for continuous green lights. They believe an ideal relationship allows two mature individuals to coexist side by side, without the necessity of reciprocating every text or invitation. Yet, placed against the anxious's desire for constant reassurance, this stance breeds loneliness even within a still active relationship. This internal tug-of-war between needs and expectations leaves the anxious partner floundering. They crave more sharing, more connection, yet all they receive is silence or lukewarm engagement. This mismatch fuels a vicious cycle. The more the anxious strives, the deeper the avoidant retreats. The deeper the avoidant retreats, the harder the anxious tries. The relationship loses its balancing catalyst, and fear of one-sidedness becomes a dividing line, splitting both hearts in two. Moving into the fourth sign, we will see how this give-and-take imbalance fuels instability, eroding trust, and precipitating more extreme reactions. But before we proceed, remember, when you feel you're fighting alone to uphold a relationship, it's time to pause, reassess both roles, and decide if you can weave a shared tapestry together or if it's destined to unravel. Sign 4, feeling of insecurity. After confronting the fear of a one-sided relationship, the anxious-avoidant cycle of push and pull returns with a misaligned tempo, giving rise to the fourth sign, the feeling of instability. At this stage, every minor fluctuation in communication and interaction becomes a tidal wave of emotion, where the anxious feels their partner withdraw, and the avoidant resents feeling suffocated by closeness. Instability emerges not just from falling in love too fast, then pushing each other away, but from the loss of predictability and security in meeting each other's needs. For the anxious partner, each passing day is full of uncertainties. Will they call earlier today? How long until a text is answered? Will tonight's date really happen or be canceled at the last minute? Their mind churns through optimistic scenarios. Maybe they're just busy too pessimistic ones. They must be seeing someone else. The larger the gap between hope and reality, the deeper the anxiety. They cannot distinguish positive signs from warning signals. For every small opening, an unusual text, an invitation to coffee is swiftly followed by another withdrawal. I have to go. Let's do it tomorrow. Conversely, the avoidant partner feels constant pressure from the anxious's desire for connection. They had envisioned a safe distance within the relationship, where they could be close yet retain autonomy. However, the inconsistency too near then too far leaves them uncertain how to adjust. When the anxious surprises them with a romantic evening or heartfelt message, the avoidant may feel appreciated yet disoriented. Am I giving in too much? Am I being drawn in too quickly? They then impose a new expectation. The anxious must rein in their emotions and not be so overwhelming. The result is a relationship like a spring being repeatedly compressed and released. The anxious plunges forward to fill the void. The avoidant retreats to protect personal boundaries. The core issue is that neither has a secure anchor. The anxious can't predict reciprocation. The avoidant can't decide when to withdraw. Trust, painstakingly built, becomes a series of doubts. Do they still think of me? Am I talking too much? Instability permeates every facet of relationship, from text messages to face-to-face encounters, fleeting glances to perplexing silences. According to researcher Philip Shaver, stability in attachment relationships is built on reliability and predictability of the partner's behavior. When those factors are disrupted, the anxious sink deeper into worry, while the avoidant withdraws further to find clear rules. Sadly, both often lack the tools to discuss this instability. The anxious may pour more energy into igniting the flame, while the avoidant pours water to extinguish it, making the flame flicker unpredictably. To escape this storm of instability, the first step is acknowledgement. Both partners must track the cycle and its frequency. They might record which days the anxious feel most connected and when the avoidant wants space, noting correlations with work, health, or mood. By making the data transparent, they free themselves from endless speculation and gain a basis for adjustment. Next, they create a variable plan, for example, agreeing on frequency of meetings, number of texts, and calling windows. This isn't rigid structure, but a guide to prevent getting lost between extremes. Another technique is cultivating emotional anchors. When the anxious feel insecure, they remind themselves of a recent positive event, perhaps a relaxed conversation or shared laughter. Conversely, when the avoidant feels the urge to retreat, they recall the value of connection and practice mindful listening without immediate reaction. Over time, both partners learn to self-regulate during moments of instability rather than let emotions dictate behavior. The push-pull cycle need not define the relationship. It can transform into intentional flexibility, where both partners move in harmony by choice, not reflex. When anxious and avoidant grasp their shared rhythm, they no longer endure wild waves of instability. They simply sing in unison to a duet of trust. Sign 5. Emotionally toxic. Following the relentless cycle of push and pull, the anxious-avoidant relationship becomes engulfed by the 5th sign, emotional toxicity. When one partner's craving for closeness directly clashes with the other's need for independence, what once felt like a safe haven turns into an invisible battlefield. Every attempt by the anxious partner to connect is perceived by the avoidant as unwelcome pressure, and every effort by the avoidant to carve out space is interpreted by the anxious as evidence of indifference or lack of care. Conflicts erupt suddenly and spread rapidly. A term of endearment misunderstood as control. A casual invitation to meet responded to with a curt busy and no explanation. And in no time, a routine exchange spirals into a grilling. Why didn't you answer my messages? Why won't you give me time? In the anxious partner's mind, each cold response is a bullet tearing away at their trust. The more I try, the more they pull away. While for the avoidant, every reproach, every tear is a threat, evoking childhood feelings of being trapped, and they react with silence or extreme avoidance. The damage of this cycle goes beyond heated arguments or tearful confrontations. It erodes self-esteem and mutual trust. The anxious partner begins to assume they're never enough, clinging to hollow promises and accepting all postponements or excuses just to secure temporary reassurance. The avoidant, in turn, feeling threatened by vulnerability or pleas, learns to numb themselves, labeling every reaction as overly sensitive or irrational, thereby justifying their own withdrawal. The result is a vicious loop where both need and resent each other, longing and loathing in equal measure. In this toxic atmosphere, even benign topics become triggering. A compliment like, "You look beautiful," is met with, "That's obvious." A caring question, "How are you today?" receives a curt, "I'm fine." Authenticity dries up as every word and action is scrutinized, analyzed, and instantly viewed through a lens of hidden agendas. When conflicts arise, instead of collaboratively solving the problem, both partners rush to assign blame, the anxious accusing the avoidant of callousness, while the avoidant criticizes the anxious as overwhelming and disrespectful of boundaries. The harshest words, born from deepest pain, become the sharpest weapons, creating rifts no apology can easily mend. Psychologically, this phenomenon is called emotional toxicity, occurring when partners in a relationship use tactics of power, threats, or manipulation to control each other's feelings. As Dr. Lisa Firestone notes, transforming the relationship from a space of sharing into a battleground of psychological maneuvering. In the anxious-avoidant dynamic, this battleground is littered with invisible traps, covert phone checks, baseless grudges, silent treatments demanding an apology before reconciliation. Yet, emotional toxicity need not be the end. First, both partners must recognize and admit its presence. Understanding when their behaviors cross into control tactics or avoidance strategies, rather than mere self-protection. Next, they must establish a new communication framework. Instead of reactive confrontation, they proactively ask exploratory questions. How do you feel when I text you repeatedly? Or, I want to give you space, but are afraid of losing our connection. How can you reassure me? And take time to listen non-judgmentally. These conversations should occur during calm moments, not in the heat of conflict. Another tool is the Fairness Journal, recording instances when both show care and support, alongside moments of hurt. The goal isn't tallying points. You supported me this many times, I supported you that many times. But painting a balanced picture of the relationship, highlighting both warmth and warning signs so they can devise a corrective plan. Reviewing this journal together helps them see evidence of love and evidence of wounds coexisting, fueling mutual commitment to healing. Over time, the relationship ceases to be a battleground and becomes a safe space where difference is accepted, and each person can express needs and boundaries without fear of attack. Emotional toxicity gives way to empathy and respect, and the journey of healing, the anxious-avoidant dynamic, transforms from a distant goal to a shared path of hope, where partners realize they are not adversaries but teammates on the same front, having journeyed together through the 5 signs, from the suffocating drive for closeness, through the fear of abandonment, worries of a one-sided effort, cycles of instability, to the emotional toxicity. You may feel trapped in an inescapable maze of an anxious-avoidant relationship, yet the path to healing always exists, right beneath your feet. The key isn't to eradicate the push and pull responses entirely, but to recognize, honor, and recalibrate them toward balance. Begin with self-awareness. The anxious partner must affirm their own worth, acknowledging that the need for intimacy is natural, but should never become a tool of manipulation. The avoidant partner must acknowledge the vital role of connection. Too much distance only yields loneliness, not freedom. Next, co-create safety pledges. Agreements on communication frequency, clear expectations, and signals for when personal space is needed. These agreements act as bridges over the chasm, preventing either from falling into misunderstanding. Finally, don't hesitate to seek external support. Therapy sessions, support groups, or specialized literature can all be invaluable resources. When you hold each other's hands on this healing journey, your relationship can transcend the anxious-avoidant trap and blossom in mutual trust and respect. Believe that love is not a battle between attachment and autonomy, but a harmonious dance of 2 souls. You can transition from a cycle of pain to a journey of peaceful companionship, where hearts find rest and your relationship flourishes in the light of understanding and acceptance.